Let me get the recording starting. Okay, it's going.
Okay, um, welcome to our presentation, Symbolism and the Occult Part 1. This is going to be a series, um, and we're going to go across a few different cultures and talk about some of the basic symbols in these cultures. And this edition is called Written on Our Hands edition. So we will be looking at um, a lot of like scriptures and stuff, but through the paradigm of looking through the lens of what those things mean in palm reading. I tend to do a lot of like the research, like the esoteric. Those who know me already know this, and and I like to clean them up through the scriptures. Like you find more accuracy when you go through the scriptures and you clean them up and you clean up those principles and you use those as a guide and with looking through that lens. So hopefully I can show that in this presentation. Um, if you look at on my screen where it shows the Urim and Thummim, and it shows a symbol of the compass and the square, which the ancient Jewish priests would wear this. And if you look, these have symbols that when they come together is when you like see it's like a prism and it opens up light. And Amy's given a presentation recently on that. I do want to talk a little bit about the background of where some of the Masonic traditions came from, and I think Zhang's our best expert on that, so he's going to speak for a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Bryan. It's been a while since I've been in masonry, so I was scrambling to reread a couple of things. And so what I like about I was in masonry for 3 years, and I found that they have a lot of hodgepodge of collection of things. They kind of became the repository in Europe for a lot of mysteries and secret ideas. Although they did have one tradition that was pretty consistent and it's kind of well put together. And so people have wondered where did it come from, and they have their own legends that there's kind of truth both ways. People criticize them as just legendary, and it might lean towards some of the being made up. But there's also stories of the Knights Templar who preceded Masonry and some of the other secret societies in Europe, like Rosicrucianism and alchemy and things like that, and stuff from Egypt. Um, that the Knights Templar took over Jerusalem in about 1,000, around 1,000 in some years or whatever AD. And people have wondered what they uncovered when they got there, because they did some excavations and they looked at, um, inside the foundations of Solomon's temple. And people have speculated that they found like the Holy Grail. So there's connections in popular culture with the Knights Templar. If you saw any of the Indiana Jones movies, they have those are Knights Templar that they put in there with the Holy Grail. Um, and there's also the thoughts about um, that they found out the bloodline of Jesus, and then the Holy Grail is just a symbol for that, which you see in the Da Vinci Code. But there are some thoughts that they found secret ceremonies from Solomon's temple. Like you could think of the precedent with putting things in cornerstones, like at the Nauvoo Temple, when they put things in the original Book of Mormon manuscript in there. And so that's the one I lean towards. And so it is still in the speculatory range, but I haven't digged into the evidence enough to trace that. But it makes sense because Joseph Smith chose masonry to clean up, like Bryan was saying, kind of like at some point to translate. There's problems with masonry because they also grab a lot of the bad secret society stuff in, and they don't know what they have and what they don't have that's good or bad. And some of those things I would see it and be like, all right, so I'm not going to buy into that. But the other things were like very ennobling and like, well, the LDS should have this in their priesthood meetings, and they canned it and they should have kept it. And it's like these are missing pieces. Like the compass and the square is even more explained as a working tool, um, how to build your soul and things like that. So there's really some fascinating things. It's like looking at the Apocrypha. I think it is a useful vein to mine to get gold out of, and it's a richer vein than others if you can look at it with a less critical eye. but they do focus on the masculine energies a lot, and they've excluded the women because that was one of the traditions all the way back from Lamech and Cain, I think, because the women expose the dark secrets. But they've cleaned up a lot more than you would think. They are not as secret society as they used to be, especially after Captain Morgan exposed them and they had anti-Mason parties in America. And so it's pretty docile right now. And there's very few remnants of the disgusting dark stuff left. And I'll leave you with one example and turn it back over to Bryan. You make a covenant that you will keep the secrets of a master Mason, except for treason and murder. But later, and you get deeper into it, you take the clause out. And if someone is murderous or treasonous, you still are a brother with them and you still keep their secrets. And I would not go that far into Masonry. And that was the York Rite, it's called. And so in Utah, they often do the Scottish Rite, which doesn't have that part because Utahns are sensitive to that backlash over Brigham Young's blood atonement stuff. And so they didn't want to keep on any semblance of sort of blood oaths and things like that. So that has been tampered down in a lot of Masonic areas. But the York Rite still has that small little piece left that you're supposed to be a brother come hell or high water. Like Kishkaman in the Book of Mormon and stuff. So, but then they have other promises that negate it, like you never have to do anything against your country or your family or your God or the Bible. So it's like, you know, you see the contradictory elements that they just gathered because they didn't know what they had. It was like the Egyptians at Alexandria. At some point, they thought this is sacred. At some point, so better safe than sorry. Like Hugh Nibley said, let's just gather it all in, and we've got it all here. So you have to sift through it yourself.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And like the points of like when they come up with legends like the Holy Grail, there's even like trickles in the Bible where it's talking about the stem of Jesse, and most people would identify that as Jesus Christ. And then it talks about like it's like a prophecy towards another servant that comes out of him, like that could be a direct reference to his lineage. Do we have some questions? You want to read them, please?
Yep. To clarify the Urim and Thummim, the top image doesn't equate the bottom image. The top triangles are right triangles. The bottom triangles are equilateral. So where is the compass and in the square? The compass is the hinge of the two lenses, and the square is the base of the pyramid. Where the equilateral triangle is at the pyramid from the side. Hidden in the 2D image is the base of the triangle containing the square.
Sweet, I like it. So I think Bryan Zang accomplished what I wanted to on that, in that he's establishing that there's trickles of these that do go back to ancient meanings. And what I find incredible fascinating, since we're getting into palm reading into this one, and is that when you take these symbols and you take their very basic essence and meaning from the traditions that are carried down, they mean the same thing in palm reading. So, is my thing showing your guys' faces and stuff? Is that covering up my screen, or do I need to get rid of that?
No, we just see the Covenants with God page.
Okay, good.
So you can shrink down the spaces.
Okay, and do you see my mouse when I point to something?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Want to go over the basic idea of like the Old Testament, and there's more than one words in the Old Testament where the Bible is written in Hebrew, where it says they made a covenant, and that talks about a lot of making covenants throughout the Old Testament, and there's more than one words that they translate out in most of our versions to say made covenants. But I wanted to put in the idea that it more likely probably should be translated as cut a covenant, meaning that's how the Hebrew reads, that God cut a covenant with so-and-so and with so-and-so and with so-and-so. And the idea is the Hebrews used a little bit more descriptive words. And I'm going to make the argument, the pitch, that the lines in our hands are covenants, cuts, that they are something where it's a trajectory, it's what we're heading towards, and they symbolize certain things and so certain cultures. If you were to look at this next page, I have a few examples on there. One being is the veil of the temple getting cut or rent or torn, right? And the other one, Adam and Eve, and they were given garments, right? Both actually through different cultures have had the symbols of cuts on them or marks on them or tears on them, and wanted to put that like idea in your minds. And if you were to look at, I have the Orion constellation too up here, and if you look at the constellation, it's not an exact straight line. Like it actually curves a little bit. If you were to draw that like with mathematically, you would see that like it circles up a little bit. Palm reading, the when something's very, very straight and precise, it's very more left-brained or masculine. But when something starts to get a curve, it becomes something that is more feminine in nature, and that recalls back to the idea of women in temple ceremonies will wear a veil, and it's a symbol of their power, that they veil the spirits that come into this earth with a body of flesh, with a tabernacle. And the idea of most like temple researchers or ancient temple researchers is that the veil or the garment is a symbol of the physical body. And then when Jesus' body was torn and rent, so was the veil of the temple, because it's a symbol pointing towards his body. And likewise, but I'm putting across the point that when they get cut or marked, it's God that's creating those cuts to symbolize the energy of that person's soul, to identify their affiliations, their trajectories, and there is something to that these ancient temple rites are foreshadowing, because likewise, if you know the history of Orion, a Christian researcher in the stars would affiliate that with Nimrod, and because Orion was the mighty hunter, right? And Nimrod was known in the book of Jasher to obtain the garment that was passed down from Adam, and thus the feminine form of the veil on him, a symbol of that garment that he had obtained, and thus the curve of the three stars of Orion's belt is a symbol bringing focus to the garment that's on the hunter. So once again, putting across the points that there's heavy symbolism pointing towards us getting cuts or marks somewhere on our body, like from God. Anything anybody want to ask or that relates to this before we move on?
There's some stuff in chat.
Okay.
I said that's how you should cut an episiotomy to avoid rectal tearing. Sorry, not sorry. And I said, interesting tie, that's relevant. And then many years ago, the church garments that people would wear had the marks cut out instead of just being sewn marks.
Interesting. So they're actual cuts. Anything else anybody want to ask?
Just makes me think of circumcision too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So my point is so jumping into like the idea of like palm reading and looking at the cuts and what they're symbolic of. It's like I see in astrology where people go out and they buy a book, and the book is trying to teach them this means this, that means that, and there's like this memorization of meanings, and I actually strongly disagree with that, in the sense that we're not learning to go after the roots. Like what I wrote here, how do we move from memorizing knowledge to understanding the root and the pattern of the energetic flow of the principle? Because I noticed that like you'll read the book and you're like it's like 70% right. It's like there's something there, but like what's off? There's something off. And that's one of my big arguments, is like, it's a little off. It's mostly accurate, but it's off. And then that's when I go back to going to the scriptures and grounding in the scriptures and trying to understand how to recreate and clean up something that seems to be somewhat accurate, but seems to be lacking in accuracy. And for example, if you were to get into the idea of the square marking, which I've drawn on each possible part of the hand, and if you guys look at your own hands, I mean, some may have a square in one mark and one in another and one not in another, right? The square is a very masculine symbol. Like, it's a symbol of the masculine, and the masculine takes on more energy of knowledge and of patriarchal, like, authority of, you need to live this way and I will live this way, and I'm living square, I'm living perfectly, I'm living, like, men take on that. And when you get a very more masculine in religion, or a masculine around religion, it's more about obedience, keeping the commandments, because it's a giving. You're giving instruction. I'm going to give you the instructions on how to live, and I'm not insulting it at all. I believe in balance, but the square is that. It takes on that symbol. So if you were to understand astrology, or the astrological meanings, or the planetary meanings from the myths and the legends, we're going to pick on Jupiter, for example, because our hand is like the solar system. Like, we're a recreation of that in meaning. And let's go to Jupiter. Jupiter is expansion, like lifting something up, luck, like getting ahead, right? And if you put a square on that, what is the meaning of giving that? Like, giving expansion. Well, what happens is when if you were to study and you're to read from like a mainstream, like, if there is a mainstream, like palm reader, somebody into palmistry, they would tell you that square on the Jupiter mount next to the Jupiter finger, the index finger, they would tell you that's the teacher's mark. That is the sign of a teacher. And people look at their hand, and somebody will be like, hey, I blog all the time. I'm always telling people what to believe. Like, I'm always teaching people. Like, why do I not have that mark? Some people are like, why do I not have that mark? And other people are like, oh, I got that mark. And they don't blog. They're not out, like, actively, like, teaching people. And then they're like, oh, this is BS. They're just playing games. It's not real because I don't have that mark, right? So, but the root's being missed. It's not it shouldn't be called the teacher's mark. Jupiter is expansion. It's the gift of expansion. So maybe my boss will see this video and get mad at me for talking about his palms, but he has the bottom half of that square, not the top half. So, which, if we're going to add symbolism into it, the upper part of expansion, meaning more spiritual things, is maybe like missing. But on the bottom half, he understands how construction should, because I'm a construction manager. He understands how construction should be. He understands planning ahead, and he has a really good understanding of the construction world and what a good manager needs to be doing. And his job is to train the managers and make sure that they have the tools needed, and that they're doing their job in a way that is productive, right? And he has the bottom part of that etched, meaning he definitely offers expansion to and helping uplift those in a very more material, earthly world way. But lacks, I mean, he's not that he's not spiritual, but he doesn't have that upper part where he's actually bringing necessarily healing to somebody's soul in a spiritual way, or expansion to where he's helping somebody go through the veil. He's not like that Peter symbol, like at the veil, right? So then that part of the hand would be missing. So my point is if your soul is healed, if it has expansion, and if you have, like, actually obtained light from the upper realms, from the heavens, and healing and connection to the heavens, and you're able to uplift and teach that and help other people obtain that, then the square marking etches into your hands. It's not that you told people what to believe on a blog, it's that you actually, the principles that you found actually work, and that they actually uplift and edify and bring somebody. And when you understand the roots of the principles to the symbolism, and you stop just calling it a name, the teacher's mark, you actually get to a place where you are much more in line and accurate in your symbolisms. Anyways, any questions on that before we move on? Any comments?
Aimee says, does it matter if it's on the right or the left hand for these symbols?
Yes, hang on to that. I'm going to push that off for now because it very much relates to where we're going. And definitely, the answer is yes. And I'm just going to answer the question with yes. And we're going to move on. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, there's a scripture, and people have probably looked at it in quite a few different ways. But it says, who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Some people reference that to like a temple or a place where it's holy, like God, Moses will go up to the mountain and commune with God, or a place of communing with God. Or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath a clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. So that incredibly is palm reading 101 right there. Like, there is a difference between clean hands and not clean hands. If somebody's energy is dirty, it shows it in the palms. If people are living like adulterous lives and they are breaking commandments and that kind of thing, they mark the palms. If somebody is lifting up their soul into vanity, and their heart just cannot be pleased by people, that it manifests on the palms in certain ways. If somebody does not keep their word and they're deceitful, it shows it on the palms. Like, and once again, going back to those ancient Masonic symbols, they mean what they mean in Masonic or Mormon temple symbolism or whatever else. They mean the same things. For example, if you look at where I have the compass mark, the compass is more of a place that goes over the breast, and it's more on the feminine side. And the feminine side takes on the symbolism more of receiving. And you have it go up between the Jupiter and Saturn palms, and you have your heart connecting to the very highest part of the hand, and it's receiving. It's about having a connection outside through the veil and through the heavens. It means you're intuitive. It means you're spiritual. It means you're able to get a download and able to receive information that's not from this world. Like, you're marked that way. And once again, if you get the square, especially there, the square, where you have your Saturn line, this middle one's a Saturn line, which has to do with structure, and you have your mind like square up with it, meaning they're both solid and intact, and it passes through without doing weird things or breaking. It will break. This middle line to the middle finger it breaks, it shatters when people are unreliable. But it becomes solid and passes all the way through. People are probably looking at their hands and like, oh,
I am.
I'm not offending people, but like, if you keep your word, and guess what? You can change it. Like, your energy will literally change on your hands if you're not keeping your word, you're not keeping your duties, you're not keeping your commitments. But my point is these scriptures mean things in palmistry. and you become solid and intact when you become solid and intact when you live holy, when you live in a righteous way. Like, it changes you. So I do think this is healthy, a very healthy discussion, and I think it would be it's healthy to question, to become as a child and to question things. And what I mean by that is, like, even the 10 Commandments, like, why? And I'll ask you the questions here. Like, why would we not covet? Why does it say not to make a graven images? I'm curious on your guys' opinion. Why would God command us to not make a graven image? Like, what's so wrong about making a Jesus painting or a Jesus statue? Like, why would God command that in ancient days, to not make an image of things in the heavens? Like, why?
So maybe this is like a really bad example. Hang on one second. So maybe this is a really bad example, but I think like there's something more beautiful about constructing your life in a way that reflects and magnifies God, right? And I think originally, if the religion was to be a father and a mother in a kingdom of abundance, right, and love and generosity and ability for children to learn, like that whole pattern like should exist within your life, as opposed to just like making something beautiful, you know, that becomes a dead work, like literally becomes kind of this, you know, I don't know. Again, I apologize for like piping in, but that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? And like all of these are living symbols. The things that you're talking about are really living, breathing symbols that exist within you because you've become that thing, as opposed to like you created something.
Cool. I like it. Thank you.
Love that.
And anybody else want to pipe in on that? Like, add any other thing why we would not, for example, make a graven image? Like, why? That's a weird commandment, right? Like, he's saying that things can be more pure and living a certain way versus, okay. Anybody else?
Maybe.
So,
Sorry, Aimee, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Abraham Gileadi in his book suggested that modernly idols were screens or anything that like we put in front of our face that we're watching and getting distracted from. Anciently, they would have been the circuses and the plays and all of these entertainments that distracted people from God. So it's not necessarily having an idol that you pray to, although that can certainly be one of the interpretations. It's anything like that you put in front of your face before God.
I like it. Like, we could lose our focus, and may not have our eye single to the glory of God. I'm going to add one for me, and keep in mind, this is not dismissive of anybody else's opinion on this. Or our Jewish friend Rob says that the ancient Hebrews, the Israelites, look for 4 meanings in all things. I would add that there's going to be spiritual inspiration on downloading the idea of artwork, and we fight in a war between good and evil, and that it's incredibly easy to infiltrate, and it's worth the dark side to infiltrate what an image looks like. Because if you can get an image pushed and the image of Jesus changed, for example, it can infiltrate and put that energy as like a symbol, as a sigil, and I'll go into sigils later on, into a whole movement if a false image has been put in. So that would be, if I was to argue like a commandment, I would go down to the roots and understand why I would live this way. Like, anyways. Okay, back to the poem reading.
Right.
Go on.
Sorry, Bryan, before we go on, I wanted to hear what Sarah was going to say.
Oh, I didn't hear Sarah speaking. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was actually going to say exactly what Aimee said, so never mind.
You guys are one heart and one mind.
So Bryan asked, so is artwork depicting things on Earth fair game?
I left out the word earth. It doesn't say of the heaven and the earth not to make graven images, because it seems like something earthly is an idol. Which, does somebody want to pull up the Old Testament 10 Commandments and like literally read it to us? Does somebody have access to that? I think it's Exodus 3. Right? Is that where it's at? Where's it at? Exodus 20.
18.
text says 18.
Okay. No. You're right.
It's 20 in the old ones.
Okay.
But who knows what the new ones are like?
Just so you guys know, there's a few different religions on the call. It's not all from one place.
You shall make for yourself. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth below, or the waters, the earth beneath, or the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them.
Okay. Which is interesting. The waters can also be a symbol of what's in the heavens. The waters above are the heavens. The waters below are the sea. And a lot of those symbols that are on the earth are also symbols that are in the sky, and pull attention to things that aren't necessarily God. So I would make that argument on not making those types of images, especially for a spiritual thing. I'm not going to get into people's lives. I'm speaking in regards to forms of worship. I think that especially if you've made a false image of Jesus and it looked differently and there was this reverence you're giving towards it, and for example, it looks more like Lucifer than Jesus because it got infiltrated. I think that's a dangerous game to play, even if you trust the person channeling that information. And that's the point I wanted to put is not trying to necessarily teach that principle as much as like, let's reach a little, it's a challenge to everyone to let's reach a little deeper and contemplate on things a little deeper and really find the meanings and understand the why, and that it's a healthy thing. Any other comments before we move on to the next part? Okay, there's three aspects of the whole soul on the hand, and Jesus says it best. Mark 12:30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, that's the top line, with all thy soul, meaning I would link that to strength also, and with all thy mind and with all thy strength. So you have your strength, your life, your soul, like your life force here at the very bottom one, the curves there, and with all thy mind, it would be that one, and all your heart would be that one at the top. So those all mean things like in palmistry. Those are all the aspects of the soul of the whole parts of the body, and they're represented in symbolism. And sorry, I dropped my rock I've been playing with. So any questions on that topic, on the aspects of those? Okay. Now I want to relate this all back. What I find most incredible when I've got curious and I've studied different faiths and I've studied more mysteries of the occult and all these crazy things that I'm just this curious child, right? What fascinates me more about all the things that I have dived into to study is that they all turn back and they all point to Jesus, and they all testify of Jesus. And what Jesus said in Isaiah, which was prior to when he was born, in Isaiah 49:16, he says, "Behold, I have engraven thee upon the palms of my hands." Like, in other words, it's marked. The covenant's been cut. Like, if he was to appear as a personage, you would have seen an outline on his hand that was already engraven where the nail marks were going to go. And when you research crucifixion nails, you will find that they are all square. They're not round. They're not round like they are nowadays. They were square, and they were bigger. And when you start to aim between the two bones, that would be the most logical place to point it, and you kind of center it there, and Jesus has demonstrated that he has a well-developed mind, that he has access to the left and the right brain. And when it has access to the left and the right brain, it doesn't just, it's not just straight, but it has a little bit of a curve to it. So if you can take those examples of what Jesus's palm would look like based on his personality and his evolution from Scripture, from the New Testament, and you were to put in the most logical place that would have centered in the hand, that would have slipped between the two bones, and you put the mark there of the square, which is the square nail that would of the size of Roman crucifixion nails, you have a mark when you look at a timeline, nails him right at the time that historically around the age of when he should have been dying. I mean, when he would have went through the crucifixion experience and his sufferings. Like, that literally testifies of him, and it testifies of his mission. And it would have likely split and nailed right in the middle of that line based on the information that we have. And when you have a square and you have it on the mind is also called the career line. It means his mission, what he was sent. It means that he was employed to do what he was done. It was his calling. He was employed. It means that he was sent. It means that it was his mission. It means that he made it his career. It was his focus, and it was in his mind, the things he experienced too. And when you put the square, it puts the symbol of the magical, the masculine energy, that he was erect, square, perfect in what he did. That he had the masculine patriarchal energy of that he did it with exactness and honor, what he did. And it also means that it also means that that he gave greatly, because the masculine energy is about giving. It means that he gave up something incredible, and especially to take the mark that big, as big as the nails were in crucifixion nails. It's symbolically, because he says once again in the Old Testament, I have engraven thee in the palms of my hands. I mean, he was already marked there, meaning it wasn't just like a wound that was that somebody had to happen and then it went away. It means that he was already marked, he was already outlined there, already had that trajectory, and that square marked means that. But also, it also takes on the symbolism as two triangles. And the triangles have the opposite energy. It has the receiving energy or the taking away energy. And in palmistry, when you have it triangulates above or below, it takes on different meanings. So when it triangulates below, the bottom part of the triangle coming off the palm of the hand is a symbol of him giving greatly, being not just that he is showing that he gave, but also that they took from him, meaning that other people were receiving from him, absorbing what he had to give, that it took from him and benefited to others. It means that. But also when it's square, it triangulates above it, it's a symbol of him also receiving an inheritance and inheriting all things. It describes his station, what he's obtained to, and how he sits at the seat of power. Okay, that's my part on Jesus. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want to explore there?
So one question is, can folks also carry that same square mark in the palm like Christ?
Yes, that is possible. And what I'm getting at is when you go back to the roots of this, is it possible for somebody to give to somebody else from their career? Are they able to work? Are they able to do a mission where they give? The answer is yes. so his mission was to give, and then if somebody else gives, they can give. And all the time, like, and the whole point of this is yes, because you learn these things in palmistry, and you learn all these people, different ways of how people are manifesting those same energies, but in different ways, and because it's an archetype. And what happens with archetypes can play out different ways. For example, if you get a triangle, and this is like a more common thing, if somebody gets a triangle above on the mind or the career line, and they're marked with a triangle and they don't have the underneath triangle, it means they're absorbing money from other people. It means they're taking things from other people, and that they're not going out and they're not earning it, but they're absorbing, they're taking, they're needy, they're the beggar, they're taking and they're absorbing more than they give. And the same thing. And I'm going to speak of this, but be very cautious before judging people, because you have other lines on the hands that can mean very incredible, great things. And those lines can cross sometimes, and they can mean incredible gifts. And sometimes those gifts, those things can triangulate when you have certain lines cross, because you could have like something that means a relationship was over or went backwards, or you turned down somebody, and you have an angle go back on the heart line. Well, that says soul there, that's mislabeled. And then you have another line coming up and it goes at a little bit of an angle and it makes a little bit of a triangle. That means that they had one point in their life where they didn't choose to hook up with this person and be a boyfriend, girlfriend with them, or a husband or wife. And then the other one could mean that they keep their word. That's their Saturn line passing through, right? So don't jump to too much conclusions when I tell you this. But if you get like a nice, clean upward triangle on the upside of the heart line, that's the energy of like you took from somebody else's relationship. And oftentimes like ongoing like affairs and those kind of things can manifest onto the palm when like people get marked with those things. But be very, very cautious in that. I mean, it could also mean a taking of energy. It could be an overbearing like person advising her girlfriend how to treat her husband, and stealing her girlfriend from the husband all the time, and hardly spending any time with the husband. It's taking energy from that, and it's triangulating. It's making a triangle. So it's symbolism. Keep in mind that you need to go to the roots, and they don't always mean the same thing. But absolutely, those things mean things throughout different archetypes, sometimes in good and bad ways, but absolutely. But it only adds more to the fact that those symbolisms, especially the square there means a giving, and it relates to the career and the mission of being sent. And it could, where it plays, and that was Jesus's career, that was his mission. It means that he was employed by somebody, but also means that that we can be employed by somebody, and we could give greatly to our job. Like it could happen in a different way. So any other comments before we move on?
Phillip says, what if a person has that on their own hand, referring to the square symbol in the center of the mind line?
If they have it?
Yeah.
I prefer much, if we're going to get very specific, I prefer like in-person things. And it can manifest, like, once again, through other things. The square does take more of a masculine energy. It could mean a strong masculine energy. It could mean giving. You go back, and it's for you to work through. It's for not necessarily somebody to tell you about your future, because then that would become a soothsayer, right? But for us to look at our own selves and look at our own covenants and marks and energies, and search deep with our own symbolism. And I actually feel that we will learn more on topics like this if us as a group who knows what our lives have been like are like sharing our own experiences with how those marks manifested, and we give each other feedback. I believe we'll get more understanding as a group versus one person telling you what it's going to mean in that situation. So is there any others?
Nope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Bryan, this is Stephanie. How are you? I appreciate you taking time to do this for us.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question. So is there anything, like any of the symbols on the palm, could any of that refer to, let's say, a previous, like past life or anything like that, as far as like ascension or anything like that? Or is the palm specifically relating to this life's mission and purpose?
Who we were, our spirits are going to have connections to an influence on the intelligence that we've attained to in this life, right? But once again, it's the veil of flesh, the tabernacle of this life, and I believe it's more centered on that. I've wondered about that subject before because I've seen markings on where it's wrapped around the hand in different places where it's not on the main part of the hand. And because if you were to look at these are timelines. You start at 0 years old here, and you go here, or you go here, or you go here. If that's the case, speaking in theory, and you wanted to see symbols of pre-life stuff, if that were the case, I would be looking more on the back, like parts of where those start there. However, that wouldn't be the case on the heart, I don't think, as much. Maybe a little bit if the heart lined and you looked at what tied to the heart line as it wrapped around. If it wrapped around further than the back of the front of the hand. But you have a lot of markings up here that have to do with symbolizing relationships and marriage and partners and children. So it wouldn't be there, but maybe if something ties around extra long or extra long there or there too, it's something I guess could be explored, but I'm not aware of a palm reader that teaches to look at your past lives on those.
That's cool. Thank you. I was just curious because you know how we carry, I think, we carry into this life. I think of what we had in a previous life, how we build upon what we had. So that's why I was just kind of curious. But this is all very fascinating. Thanks so much. Really cool. So it just shows that everything is revealed at some point or another, right? We can't conceal who we are because
I think we shouted
carry
upon
it on us. Thank you. Thanks, Bryan.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You talk about like the hand changing in response to kind of our behavior and the energy that we're putting off. Like, how long does it take for a hand to change? Like, what does that mean?
That's a good question. Like, and I can answer that in a personal way. The first palm reader that taught me, that I went to a class, he said that they did a study where they went into these inmates that had these wrecked lives and they had these ugly palm energies etched on them, and they went and started teaching them, sending teachers and rehabilitators and teaching them how to have education and to got them some psychological help, and they did a study on them in a few months of working with them and teaching them how to work and principles. And they said their hands changed, their trajectories of their lives changed. And I've seen that where I've said rude things to friends and seen them several months later, and they would be like, "Oh, yeah, you had a bad trajectory. That went away. Like, good job. Like you've been changing." And I've been playing around with this 2-3 years, and I've seen changes already. I will say this for mine. Like, for example, there's marriage lines, and when your marriage lines are like that, it shows like, oh, you're headed for a little bit of a clash. And then when you split up, it starts to like split like that. And I won't go ahead and embarrass a friend on the call, but a friend on the call, he had like a relationship line growing in, and it started growing in like, oh, there's something faint there, and it started to get stronger and stronger, and it's like, you don't have like a girlfriend yet. It looks like it's going to happen really soon. And him and I were always looking at it, joking with it, and next thing you know, there's a woman hanging around, like, and it was there. Like, so apologies, but like you'll see that over the course of months. Like it can happen a few months. It starts really light and faint, and then as it starts to become more of a reality, yeah. Anything else?
Stephanie said kind of freaky.
It is freaky. My advice to everybody: live a good, pure life, or don't show people your hands. And truthfully speaking, when friends have like shown me stuff, it's like, man, like sometimes I'm like, I hate it. I sometimes like hate it, and I'm gonna move into the spot of where, like, I want to be kind of more done with like reading people's hands and spend much more time like teaching people how to read their own hands. Like, nope, don't want to see what you guys have been up to. But like sometimes it's like I've probably made mistakes and said, sometimes I felt like it's worked out well speaking on things like, hey, what have you been up to? Like, you gotta watch this. Other times, like, people are like, oh, like they get pretty triggered and start making life changes over something that you're like, you gotta knock this off. So yeah, like I've seen them change, but yeah, I want to get much more. And this presentation, I guess the mic drop to this presentation is things are a little bit weird with COVID now, even though like in Utah, we're about 30% vaccinated and we've had our cases at a fraction of what they were. It's still, I think people are a little hesitant to even get together with small gatherings, but I am going to plan a palm reading symbolism night. This presentations in my series are all going to have to do with symbolism and the practice of it. We will have a presentation, which is the masculine knowledge of dispersing knowledge, and then we will have a more feminine activity where we're having activities together, and just want to work out a date where we can get more people together. We can get the word out, and we can get like a good group of maybe whatever the government allows, 10, 20, whatever, not draw too much controversy, but letting the numbers die down and honoring people's kind of boundaries for that. So we will be, and that's something we can Zoom to those who aren't there, and we'll go into a little more details. We'll open it up on Zoom, and we'll have people there in person, and we'll give a quick little more. The point of this presentation isn't about teaching you how to read palms as much as like look about how these testify of gospel principles. Okay. Ready for the next slide?
Yeah, go for it.
Let's go. Okay, throw back to those who, I realize not all of you guys come back with a Mormon background, but kind of a throwback to whoever came from there. If you see the picture on the screen, that is Lucy Mack Smith. That is the founder of Mormonism's mother, Joseph Smith's mom, and she was a palm reader. So, I'm going to go into some more Bible scriptures, but I'm going to have a couple ones that came from the Doctrine and Covenants and Joseph Smith that has to do with principles that relate to palmistry. Doctrine and Covenants 84:28. For he, John the Baptist, was baptized while he was yet in his childhood, and was ordained by an angel at the time that he was eight days old, unto this power, to overthrow the kingdom of the Jews, to make straight the way of the Lord before the face of his people, to prepare them for the coming of the Lord, in whose hand is given all power. So once again, it's a reference to power in the hand. Doctrine and Covenants 85:7. This is, lots of people make this claims, but only certain people are going to get the marks, and that's what I want to make a point of. And it shall come to pass that I, the Lord God, will send one mighty and strong, holding the scepter of power in his hand, clothed with light for covering, whose mouth shall utter eternal words, while his bowels shall be a fountain of truth, and set in house the order of God. So, if you're going to set in house the order of God, that part of your thing is going to, of your palm, your life force that you're putting your life force in, is going to align with Saturn, and it's going to loop with Saturn most likely. That's most likely how it's going to be. That if you're uttering eternal words, you're going to have an intact thing, showing the square, showing that you give truth, that you speak truth, that you keep your word. And also, if you're uttering eternal words, you are marked with that connection to heaven too. And showing that you have that connection to God and have that veil open. And not just that, you're not going to have this. Some people have these little intuition marks where they have the compass in that certain spot that I showed, and it shows that, oh yeah, they're intuitive. And the more deeper it grows, it shows that they're quick at following promptings. But it starts to open and goes wide. It has symbolism. It opens and it goes wide if somebody is literally communing with Jesus and literally is prophetic and literally understands and has the intelligence of the principles of the universe and understands the gospel in its purity. Like, you are marked a certain way if you understand that. And if you do not, and you do not have that connection, you are not marked that way. So you can have the veil open, but it's in a more limited, smaller way. And I have seen, I think, 2, 3, 4 people that may have a pretty solid understanding. Looked at hundreds and hundreds of palms, and I've seen very, very, very few that have a really solid understanding of the eternities. And once again,
Bryan, what does that mark look like? The scepter in the hand?
Well, like if we're talking about having that connection to the bell, I'm talking about the compass. The compass is the feminine form of spirituality, and where the square gives. Like, once again, the square gives, and the compass receives, and the compass would go to where it generally centers between Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is expansion, and it's the highest part of the heart. Same with where the Saturn is, and it can move a little bit depending on other energies, which I can get more into in the class that I teach on it. But there'll be a compass mark there. It's at the highest part of the heart, meaning our heart, our seat of emotions, our yearning towards God. The highest part of us is connecting to the highest part of the hand, and it opens with the compass opening outwards, meaning it's receiving. And it's not an uncommon mark for somebody to be intuitive or that, but it is a little more uncommon when the compass opens and encompasses like all the things from God that are possible. Then it opens much bigger, and that person has a greater understanding, and they will be marked that way. And then if they are super, super, super powerful marked that way, it can even double line. But very, very few people are going to have marks or energies on the large level that I'm speaking of. And I will also, I'm not going to answer this next question. You guys can ask it, but I'm not going to answer it. But it says that this person will have the scepter of power in his hand. There are scepters throughout traditions drawn where you have, like if you were to look at the Egyptian, one of the oldest versions in ancient traditions of Orion, they have, once again, he's holding the scepter of power. Like, but my point is this like if somebody fulfills like prophecy, they will have, and they actually have power like unto Moses or Jesus, they will have a scepter of power in their hand. And I'm going to go on. I know not if people have seen the new Star Wars, I know Rey's not, the new ones aren't the most popular, but I like all Star Wars, all things Star Wars. A Bible scripture kind of articulating this, and this is going to circle back and answer Aimee's question from earlier. Matthew 26:64. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. So that begs the question, what's the difference of what's marked in the left hand and what's marked in the right hand? Is there a difference if it's marked on one or on the other? There are lots of Bible scriptures that talk about the right hand of power, the right hand of power, the right hand of power. Okay. In palmistry, if we're going to look at through this through the lens of palmistry, the right hand of power, the right hand is what you wave with people with. It's what you show people. And the left hand is what you kind of keep to yourself more. You shake hands with the right, you wave. It's more the proper hand to do things with. And when you show people your right hand, it's what you show people. So when God shows his right hand of power, and there's other symbolism of the left and the right. The left can be evil and the right can be what's good in reference to God. And there are references in scripture talking about there are certain judgments reserved only to those who earn those judgments. And once again, it's a secret. It's on the left hand, they get the secret punishment, right? But the right hand of power means you have the power to show it to everyone. So if somebody like can do the works of God and they do the works of God and only they're like, let's say they lay hands on their child and only their child or their immediate family saw that healing, they're going to have marks of power in their left hand, in their secret hand. Speaking in generalities, it can change if somebody is more dominant with another hand, but just want to make a note of that. But the right hand is what you show the world. So if Elijah from the Old Testament is doing miracles and powers in the sight of all the people, he has the right hand of power. He has the power to manifest it in front of other people, like other people see his power. God, Jesus coming with the right hand of power, it's something that's manifested to the world. He has the right hand of power. He has the power to show his miracles among the nations. That's what that means in palmistry. And that's the difference. The left is more your secrets about what you hide or what the people that know you really well know. The right hand is what you show to the public. Any questions? Okay, I want to get into healing a little bit. It's pretty common that people laid their hands on to heal people. And it came to pass that the father of did I say that right? Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. And then another from the Gospels, Luke 13:13. And he, Jesus, laid his hands on her and immediately was made straight. In other words, healed, and glorified God. So this tradition isn't just held in the Bible, but among energy working modalities such as Reiki, where they do symbols and they're doing these, they do rituals where they engrave in symbols on the hand. And my argument is when God is cutting or etching seemingly cuts or creases or symbols that are symbols of the etchings that are on the veils of the temple, and they are etched in the hand. And there's etching of you keeping your word being honorable, you keeping your word all the time, you not lifting your soul into vanity, you having a clean hands and a pure heart and a connection to heaven, uttering eternal words. You are laying those emblems of power on somebody if you are laying on hands to heal the sick. And how great of a more powerful way than to live a life that's pure, that's erect, that's holy, that's been cleansed with Jesus' blood, than to embody those and letting God etch those things into your hands by the way you live, by the holiness that Jesus can offer you, that he can sanctify and put in you. And I don't mean this by any means of like, I think works and grace can get out of balance. Sometimes people get too focused on works. And I do want to throw a caveat out there that like, we all have weaknesses, and the most effective way of repentance, of living a clean life, is laying it at the feet of Jesus and relying on his grace to to have the power to be able to live a holy or a happy life, letting that change work into you. So by no means do I mean do this on your own, but the means by which, like, but I do mean it in a way that if we're living a dirty life or an unholy life or a not really connected to Jesus life, like it does mark that in the palms. And my argument is in the healing world that our holiness, our ability to be clean, which is through Jesus's blood, is the center to all healing. If you notice when Jesus was walking and a woman touched his garment and he says, the virtue hath left me, and she was healed. It points to Jesus's holiness is where healing comes from. And if we can channel that holiness from God and let him make that change in us to where we can live a holy life, then we have access to having our palms etched with those emblems of power, and we will see greater miracles and greater works and greater effectiveness in the healing realms when we have been connected to God, when we have his holiness in us. Any comments?
Bryan, sorry, this is Stephanie. I was just thinking, how that there's a scripture that talks about having clean hands and clean heart.
Yep.
Well, I was just thinking the clean hands is probably referring to what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, you came in a little late to the discussion. That's on the slide actually. I'll pull it back and
okay,
and show you it real quick.
Okay, I probably missed that earlier. Okay.
Yeah, right there. You shall send in the
It's just so cool, guys. It just shows how all things bear witness. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just fascinating. You know what I mean? It's like the Lord does it again and again with nature, with palms. I mean, everything out there bears witness that he is, right?
Yep.
It's just so cool. I just love it. It's just fascinating.
Yes, and early in the presentation, I was like, everything I've learned from everything I've explored, it all turns back and points to Jesus.
Bryan said, like the book of Abraham, where planets channel energy and light in the cosmos.
Oh, fair, because it says that. So like the idea that the sun, like channels and feeds its energy to our earth and its warmth and its light, and also to the moon, and then the idea that got ignited and the earth, the sun received its light from a greater planet further on. So very cool. We have just like a couple more slides. We're gonna go a little bit dark. Can you guys handle dark? So let's look at the mark of the beast in terms of palmistry. So and if somebody points out and recognizes a certain marks on people or who it is, please don't say. We want to stay respectful to people in the world. I was just trying to find a close example of what marks in the forehead that looked like, anyways, the ancient Hebrew 6. Anyways, we'll get into that. Mark of the beast and magical sigils is what we're going to talk about. But Revelation 13:6, and he causeth all, both small and great and rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name, which is here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So anyway, 666. So in Hebrew, 666 would be, in a sense, 3 of their number 6. We think in terms of like, 6 things are going to happen, right? And Rob K, who grew up Israelite blood, gave us a presentation not too long ago, and he talked about each letter or number of the alphabet having specific meanings, like each one embodies like something else. And he talked about the aleph, the first letter or number in the Hebrew alphabet, and how it came from the source of looking like an ox, and how it had symbols and meanings like built into, like words built into that, even that just that letter. So I went to the Hebrew 6, the 6th letter, which is also used as the 6th number, and it is a crook, like a shepherd's crook. And it also has been in cultures used as a tent peg that nails something down and pins it down. But the crook can be a symbol of, like, think of sheep, and you crook the head of a sheep, and it's in captivity. It's just a sheep, and you've heard of people sheeple, right? But the idea of hooking something and putting them into captivity is, I believe, a sense the idea. And I'm not saying these can't mean other things. And like, if we're gonna, I know a lot of people in the Christian world will talk about the mark of the beast and the microchip that's going to get all put in all of us. And I'm just going to say right now, that's above my pay grade. So I'm not going to comment either way on that. But I am going to look at it through the lens of palmistry. And I see this symbol as a symbol of sheep getting put into captivity and controlled, or the idea of the beast, something becomes more animalistic. And it's interesting that there is 666, which there's 3 6s, and there's 3 main marks on the hand. It says it can be put in the right hand, or in the forehead. And here I looked up, and I just started like Googling a lot of different people, and please don't say the person's name, but it's the closest to like the hook marks I could find on somebody's forehead, and there's like 3 of them. So I'm like, oh, this is a good one, and so I just cropped it and just want to make it to where I could use the marks as an example without pointing any fingers. But interesting that, like, in the forehead, which has to do with focus or foresight, it shows there's a chance that, and I'm not saying this is doctrine, but there's a chance that people like palmistry could possibly be marked in their foreheads. Me and a friend are studying that kind of stuff and haven't came to super strong conclusions, but are still in the area of research. And likewise with the idea of captivity. What if I showed you 3 main, like the heart, the mind, and the strength, the life force, the soul. What if the idea of this, if we're looking through the lens of palmistry, has to do with getting put into captivity from the adversary in all the aspects of your soul? Meaning your heart's been put into captivity. It's in bondage. Your heart, your mind also is put into captivity, and your life, you've been put into captivity. And what if it's also a calling to what happens into this world, where it becomes a place more of captivity, becomes more wicked, and becomes more in captivity to the evil one? So I wanted to put forth that idea. Anybody have any comments on that part?
Bryan said, Rob K said that repetition makes it louder.
I like that. So I'm going to touch on magic a little bit. I know this is probably not, people don't want to know the dark magic as much, but I feel like it relates.
Hey, Bryan, sorry, this is definitely really quick. Do you think that the mark on the forehead could also be referring to the third eye, maybe not having clarity, being clogged, or is that maybe just a little, maybe not quite?
That is a good point, because Jesus speaks of, if your eye is single to the glory of God. In other words, your focus. I like to reword that to focus. Like, what is your focus on? Like, that's where your imagination happens. That's where your pineal gland is. That's where your foresight, your creativity. And if you use all the forces of your soul to have a focus that is not the glory of God, then it's in captivity to something else. And if when you let that full focus come on, yeah, absolutely, I believe there is something to that. And I believe that is scriptural too, if you put into account what Jesus says about making sure your eye is single to the glory of God.
Cool, thank you.
So let's talk witchcraft 101. We're doing a witchcraft lesson now, okay? In witchcraft, literally, the class would be called Beginner's Witchcraft or Witchcraft 101, depending on whoever's teaching it. But this is the type of stuff they teach in Witchcraft 101. And I'm not going to say how I know that. But sigils are like symbols, like where somebody that is a witch will want to make a product, and they put in the symbolism to attract, lure, put a manifest. It's like a manifestation spell, and then they put that energy in when they create a symbol. And it's like a logo, like the real world would call it a logo. If a witch is doing it, they're calling it a sigil, and they're doing like a ritual or a ceremonial like creation of this symbol or logo, or they call it sigil, and it's meant to attract and manifest their intentions for it. And I find it very, very interesting. I'm not saying that this is going to make you like go to hell or anything like that, but I'm trying not to exaggerate this. But it's interesting that Monster Energy drink used the Hebrew, it looks very similar to the Hebrew 6, and they used it 3 times to make the M on the Monster Energy drink. And what's more fascinating with that is that's the symbol of captivity, and how I would interpret that. And it has all this caffeine, which would make you captive or like in bondage and thirsting for that becoming your focus. You have your 2 or 3 monsters a day, you know what I mean? So, but I just find that incredibly interesting that that's where we would find those symbols.
What's the L?
So Bryan,
that's a Greek symbol, I think.
question.
Greek butterfly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm curious. You can also use that for a not just negative but positive, right? If you knew the symbolisms of some things, you can infuse your whatever you're trying to create in a logo that could be for a righteous purpose. I guess I'm thinking kind of like Denver Snuffer's cover of some of his books. He can put little symbols in there that in Hebrew, that mean positive stuff, instead of, like you're saying, witchcraft. You can infuse a symbol with something for an evil cause. You could use symbols for righteous causes.
Yeah, definitely. Like, but I would go back to the roots of everything. Like I try, and I'm not the type that goes out and is trying to manage people and tell people what's right or wrong. I'd rather go to the roots of it and be like, okay, what's the root purpose of this commandment or this thing? How do I not cause any harm? Like, for example, I study palm reading, but like, I want to do it in a way where we're practicing symbolism, but I don't want anybody to be dependent on me, and I don't want to be telling people's futures. Even if I see their futures, if I see that they have a bad trajectory, fine, it's a friend, and I worry that they're living in an unhealthy way and it's showing. Okay, I'll bring it up. But like the idea of like a soothsayer, like you do not want somebody that is a crutch that takes the place of God or Jesus in your life. You don't want to take that away. That's thou shalt have no other gods before me. Like you need to protect that. But if we're looking into this stuff and we're practicing symbolism and we're practicing the language of the God, or as Spencer here says, the language of the heart that connects to God, however he said it, like slaughtering him. I misquoted you, sorry. But we find those roots and we honor those roots. We honor not putting anything before Jesus, any idol worship before Jesus. But yet also, like, what's our intentions? What's our focus? If we're like, is our focus to put people in captivity? Is our focus to bring people to Christ? And I'm going to say I'm open to people using symbols as an attractants. I would be be conscious in what I'm doing, and would be prayerful about it and mindful that I was in good graces with God, and I would be checking and cleaning up how I saw things with reading the Word of God. That's all I probably want to say on that. Yeah.
Bryan says, and I think this is, do signs follow belief rather than force energy by manifesting an idol-like witchcraft or voodoo adulteress-like? If you want to read it yourself.
I may not fully understand. So signs follow belief rather than force energy by manifesting an idol like witchcraft or voodoo adulteress like. Okay, I want to comment on that a little bit, maybe in a little bit different way, but this is from the understanding that I've came to, the difference between the things of God and the things of like witchcraft. And this is how I see the difference. When you read like the Bible and like, for example, the book of Jude that comes before the book of Revelation, it's literally a ripoff. It copied things like from the book of Enoch. And then a lot of the book of Revelation, the word ripoff is rude. I believe in those books, but they're quoting earlier material. And like Zechariah, the book of Zechariah has a lot of stuff that's in the book of Revelation. Like they do repeat other prophets quite a bit, even in the Bible. They take stuff from earlier sources, and my point is now that we found like the book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we can like date it before the New Testament now, we can show that, hey, that maybe there's some more accuracy to this apocryphal book than we maybe gave credit for. So I want to be clean with why I'm saying I have this view, but I've read through a lot of the book of Enoch, and it's outlined the principles of magic in that quite a bit, and where it talks about the watchers and coming down, and it's filling in a lot of holes where the Bible just barely touched on a lot in Genesis. The Bible would talk about the watchers and the giants, it would mention those things, but then they're talking more at length in the book of Enoch. And I'm not saying it's a perfectly intact, accurate book. I don't know that. That's above my pay grade. But I do think that there's some good principles in it that stand on their own. And with that, using that book, so in that book, what happens is you have angels that condescend, called the Watchers, and they see these women and they lust after them in that book, and they come before their appointed time. It's meaning like they would have been allowed to do it if they would have approached God and waited for their appointed time to incarnate according to that book. And it puts in place where Michael and Raphael go before Jehovah and the council of the gods. In other words, the angels that surround God, the ones that are his council, which are actually mentioned in the Bible also, in Psalms 82, is they approach there, and Michael's complaint is, look, they're teaching the secrets of the heavens. And when you go back into the older Israelite or Jewish Kabbalah stuff, and the more ancient you can go with all these things, all this witchcraft is a ripoff from what the ancient fathers had. Like they literally ripped stuff off. Like I don't want to be the one to like teach witchcraft, even though I kind of did here, but I wanted to do it to set up some principles. If you were to want to be a more powerful witch, you don't go, you get acquainted with the ideas, and then you go back to your scriptures, because those principles, even in the New Testament, the things Jesus is doing, he's out embodying those principles. Like there's principles that Jesus understands, like in the New Testament. And I would make the argument like that, like if somebody wanted to be a more powerful witch, let's say, and they're into that, they should be reading the things Jesus did. Like his principles that he teaches and embodies, and that's also in the Old Testament, embody those principles more better, more pure, more strongly, and they're taught better if you know how to recognize them from studying that other world. So, but I've came to the conclusion that the difference between the light and the dark, oftentimes when it comes to spells and manifestation things, especially when you get into the Jewish customs, they have appointed days where God's appointed them to do certain rituals or ceremonies. But the difference is timing. A witch says, I want this now. I'm going to manifest and give myself this. Somebody that does the things of God, they submit to God, and they do things according to his will and order and his timing. And some people would even argue that that was the whole case in the Garden of Eden, that it's not that Adam and Eve would necessarily not ever partake of knowledge of good and evil, but that they were supposed to observe the Sabbath and have a day of rest. You can take that or leave it, but everything I think comes down to God's timing. For example, revenge. God will deal justly, and when we take getting revenge on our enemy, we've taken God's judgment's God's. Why would we take that away from God? It's his. He'll execute what's right according to his justice and mercy. So I'm going to point to that. Does that answer your question good enough, Bryan Zang?
Yeah, thanks. You got into what I was trying to get to, and I had to be concise, so sorry for the strange sentence.
That's fine. Made me had to actually think.
So Jay said the Ancient Book of Enoch by Ken Johnson is a good translation of the Book of Enoch, where he includes lots of footnotes from a Christian perspective that I found insightful. And Jana said, we also know that Satan takes the principles of light and uses them for his dark purpose.
Yeah. Good. Those are all very good comments. Thank you. So, and like looking at this as like a big picture, yeah. So this is the point. This is the, like, in closing, what I wanted to kind of put forth. Like, symbolism is the language of God. And so my challenge to all of you is, what are we doing in our lives to practice and learn symbolism? I don't feel like everybody needs to be like me and needs to learn palmistry or whatever else. But I do feel that it is very, very healthy to have some way of practicing symbolism, to where we can start understanding the things of God deeper and chasing things to the root in a more deeper way. And something to think about, because think about it, you have a dream. What if that was from God? The more practice you are in symbolism, and the more your mind is just more able to connect to symbols in that way, it's the more you're going to be able to unlock things more easily, the more you're going to be able to connect to God's language and God's spirit. And even in the simplest of things, like even in Jesus' last work on the cross, was he was up on the cross and he says to John, he says, "Behold thy mother." That was his last act. And even in some sense, that was a parable. It's not literally his mom. He didn't mean to get inside of her and get born out again. But in a figurative way, in a symbolic way, hey, she's your mother now. Treat her as such. Take care of her. Like, I'm about to die. So just want to strongly testify that how important symbolism is. And then also, when greater symbols and the greater, deeper we dive into the things of God, or even principles from all over the universe or all over the earth, that they also all do point back to Christ. These principles testify of Christ and his mission and what he did and how he lived, and I just add my testimony to that. turn the time over for you guys for whatever discussion you guys want to have, and anything you guys want to bring up. I'm not hearing anybody.
Yeah, I had a thought. I've actually been thinking about this for a while. Sorry, I've been talking a lot lately, you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, when you're talking about witchcraft, I think that, you know, we can apply, there's the creator and the destroyer, Jesus Christ and the devil. And Jesus Christ creates and the devil destroys. And so, like, if you look at organizations that have been set up, and maybe set up by good people with great intentions, and then people who, sorry, I have kids. Okay, and then people come in with bad intentions, and they don't have the ability to create something bigger. They only have the ability to create, to destroy. And so, like, so everything in my mind, I'm kind of seeing everything as creation is good. And I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but it's like the destroyer and evil destroys and tears things down and tears people down, and then everything good, you know, because like you can make an argument about any one person, like, oh, they're an evil person, but it's like, but they did create something that helped people. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. I'm having this thought, but anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about creating and destroying, and so like applying that even to my own life, where it's like, I need to clean the kitchen. This is not a godly thing to do, to clean the kitchen. How can I make it a godly practice? And it's like, by applying that principle, this is creating a space where my family can come and we can congregate and we can eat and break bread together. And so, like, seeing everything in that light, it's like, okay, is this destroying someone else? Is this destroying their testimony or destroying their, who they are? Like speaking ill of people, like, am I destroying someone else's opinion of someone else, or am I building them up and making them feel happier and better and excited about life? So anyway, just a thought.
I think that's a good point. I think it's a lot better to stay on point with building more than tearing down. But yeah, I think of most of the people on this call are that way. Where their focus is more of like finding the truth from like all places and finding what connects, not necessarily what's bad.
I wanted to say something based off that, the voodoo thought I was bringing up that you taught me earlier about agency too, to expound on that. I just think about how the difference between doing something in a good way versus a bad way includes trying to force things to happen out of your own will. And that phrase, to make straight the paths of the Lord, makes me think about clearing the way so God can do miracles, as opposed to trying to make them happen yourself. And if you can clear the way to let that blessings flow, it kind of ties back to when Jesus said, how can someone, the same mouth, give out blessings and cursings? So we have to think about, you know, being wise but not harmful to others, because these things have power to them, and sometimes you manifest your intentions and you get upset and you can bring bad things about and not mean to. So you have to be careful with it.
Cool. Jeff's been quiet.
Hey, Bryan, do you want to share?
Go, Jan. I think Jana, did you go first, or was somebody else there?
Somebody else was there. I don't know who went first, though.
Wasn't important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to razz Bryan. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you to share what you shared with me about like a satanic ritual and how they will consume versus God, following the principle of sacrifice. Just a little more dark versus light, you know?
I generally don't. I try not to point these things out publicly all the time. So
It's okay. I can point it out. Everybody just forget that Bryan said it.
We'll have to edit this out of. I'll say it to here, but we're going to edit this out of the when it goes on YouTube. But if you look at biblical prophecy,